Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization isn't an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict, though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.
Welcome to the first episode of Field Notes, in which I talk with people from my network and my crew and my scene, if you will, about what they do in their life to support the mission that they have dedicated themselves to, how they view the world in light of that mission, and how they organize their lives to support that, as well as what they will bring to the upcoming crew campaign, a 5-week program in which you are invited to do the same. Articulate your vision, derive a mission from that, link up with other people, form crews that can support you, and then go on a campaign to accomplish real-world, tangible objectives that move you along. And with that, I want to welcome my first guest, Brandon Hayes, a longtime friend, a president to my vice president at the Natural Law Institute, and somebody whose work and way of moving through the world I admire and appreciate greatly. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you, Moritz. That was a lovely introduction. And I understand you'd like to get into how I got into the position I'm in currently, and I can give you a little bit of a past approach. I'm an entrepreneur of entrepreneurs on both my grandfather's side and my father. I still render my life in a way that involves self-determination at all levels. I've always found myself at odds with authority figures in the institutions that I've come across because I've always felt and now can measurably decide that their influence and impact in my life was arbitrary in its manifestation. Authority never came from a place that was reciprocal in its unfurling. Early in my life, into high school, I had a long-term relationship that lasted into my early 20s that dissolved swiftly after internal relationship strife. I had another relationship that started soon after that devolved even quicker. I came to a place in my life where the only variable that was alternated was me, and I had to do some self-reflection. When I came across my present wife, my third attempt at a long-term relationship, because that's what I believe attempts at relationships are, I made foundational changes to the way that I approach the world, which included centering my approach around the production of a family, which was to be started 7 years upon us meeting. My first child was born about 7 years after that meeting in 2020. January, February, March, June 3rd, 2020, like the height of COVID. That's when he was born. That month, that following month is when we, at the time, the Proprietarian Institute, organized the event in Richmond. Okay, so when I organized my life around creating a family, which it was previously not, it was organized around entrepreneurial venture, in which I was the last of a line of people, right? I took that seriously. I didn't involve myself in politics. I didn't care what people wanted to do long term. I knew that this was a biological dead end for me, and we live in what I considered a technological paradise with communicative capabilities beyond all peoples of the past. Opinion of people today is they live better than kings of the past, and they complain about everything all the time, which is outrageous to me. which is why I'm in the position I am as the president of the Natural Law Institute, because the path in attempting to acquire the information to figure that out, this is where it has landed me. It's not a super comforting story now that I say it out loud to you, so give me a sec to digest the position I'm in to explain from now. I have since May taken it upon myself to, what do you say, we call it in social science, go slumming in the courts and our institutional systems, which I abandoned back when I was essentially a child, 16 years old. I got involved in dogs, and I spent the better part of a decade, a dozen years, mostly interfacing with canines, not people, other than to explain to people why their management of this animal causes the behavior that they see and that they're responsible and ultimately accountable for it should their dog make a terrible decision. I actually took it upon myself to deal with the worst dogs I could possibly find. So if your dog was likely to bite me, I was the guy you called to train it. So I endeavor back into the world of people right about when I decide to have a family, which is give or take 2014. I come across the propertarian work in 2015 or 16. We endeavor to perform the political stunt in 2020, Richmond, which mostly disassociated those who were unified on the dissident right and forced 50% of them into direct action, direct rubber meets the road decision-making trees for them moving forward from that event. They backed out of the arena of social discord and discourse and signaling and entered into the world as professionals who had a tool set and a mindset and a skill set that rendered them demonstrably superior to those around them. We are now about 5 years into that endeavoring.
Can you recount what the event was or how it did that?
Yes, I can. It was about, 4 months before when we started kind of rallying to make this maneuver. We framed it as a second declaration, which is essentially stating that the systems and institutions that manage the human capital here are doing so in an abusive fashion and need to be overturned. It was the height of COVID. We invited people to a hostile place. It's Richmond, Virginia, very blue place with very blue people. Aside another, confrontational gathering that was happening at the same time, another Second Amendment rally. The events on the ground were to deliver what is a declaratory speech of conflict on the steps of the courthouse, which we did. What arose due to that speech was a confrontation with a local group, which our guys on the ground, de-escalated properly within moments of it occurring. But we were moments away from causing a shootout, and the surrounds were, police vehicles down one side and the other side of the street that we were on, and on either side of the block that we were on. So they were prepared for what was set up to be a moment of bloodshed. And what our people proved is even in a hostile place, under hostile conditions, saying hostile things, people will negotiate under terms that are reasonable. They always do. And people always do. Most people who were involved in this political stunt, and I'll take the shouldering, the accountability for this perceptual blunder on my shoulders only, I'll own this one myself, is that it was too personal for them. It was too personal for them. It was too personal for how they saw the world, the events that unfolded. They attached themselves too personally to the leadership that showed up when we are a crew that does what we can with what we have on the ground when we can do it, and in an entrepreneurial fashion, and that is messy. Messy things happen when you act in the actual world. Tie it back to what I used to do professionally in dogs. I ran a group class for dogs that, terrible dogs, would bite you, would bite the dogs around them. There were dog fights in those classes. Even when it was the people's own dogs, most people freeze when conflict occurs, even if they present as someone that won't. 99% of them, they have no idea what to do. And that's on the tail end of me prefacing the class with these things can happen, right? Fights can break out. This is what I want you to do. This is what you're responsible to do with your own dog, etc., and so on. So despite all those instructions, conflict still comes as an abrupt surprise to people's nervous system. And people and their perceptions of this place don't account for that at all. So the political stunt was an attempt at producing a situation in which behaviors under duress became apparent, and people learned how to act against this place, knowing that people's demonstrated actions bear what they want more than their words, than what they purport to want, what they say they would kill or die for, etc. Right? Those are demonstrations that are in the doing. Like, if you say you'll kill for something, you do kill for it, right? If you say you'll die for something, you aren't here anymore, right? You're dead. You went to go do it and clearly didn't succeed, because this is where we are at right now in the midst of civilizational collapse. So I tried to do some loops back into how this all came about and where we are at now, and that my analysis of the situation on the ground is that most people are 2 magnitudes of scale behind understanding the problems that exist present.
By that, you mean they think too small, or they don't understand how things operate at scale, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I don't. Let me do the deep dive into the perception, because I didn't think it through. Most people are too confident in what they know at scales that are way beyond them, and not confident enough and even blundering in what they ought to do locally all the time, which could start at like the locus of your attention, how it is you allocate your conscious being in time through think you know what a world leader should do at any given time. Those 2 things exist at once, and that's a problem that we solve, really, but should take seriously as a people, across peoples.
So you've given us a sense of the event. You've given us a sense of what it meant. Take us back to today from there, and how the trajectory has been for you to organize what you're doing in your life to support the mission that, I guess, gave rise to actually doing this in the first place. Like, what is your vista now? And you already teased that you're doing the lawsuits. Yeah, take us there.
I spent 10 hours each way with Kurt, the co-founder, of the Natural Law Institute now. We essentially founded the Institute on the way home from Richmond. We have a complete scope opportunistic plan, which is we endeavor to alter every market by adding the precision we do using the criteria for reciprocity, really, to create that precision increase while creating the commensurability across those markets. And our plan to do it is to demonstrate excellence, so to win inside of any market, and then use the cascading failure, to cross marketplaces. The beauty of the way we have structured the endeavor is that we don't have to try to plan or control anything. People make the decisions, they make the outcomes exist in the world. The things you need to do against those outcomes are decidable, and growing the vector of action is something that you can aim at demonstrably. I hope to get across to the fellowship that is what we're doing. They demonstrate understanding it. Whether they have internalized or integrated the scope is irrelevant to me, at this point in time, People in our circles seem to understand the limits of their competence and don't attempt to go beyond them. I don't know if that's because we've created an internal structure that does that, or because our external filtering produces that as an outcome. Again, it's not something I care even to know, but that's the way it presents to me. I don't see how anyone could falsify that. So I attempt to create an alignment between people who understand they have no reason to interact with one another because their demonstrated interests are in sync in a manner that disaffords conflict between them to arise as time pushes on. That means other people get wiped out by conflict. They get driven together into a coalition, and then that coalition looks devastating to any outside, grown institution or cooperative, which I don't see cooperatives existing. I see monopolies existing in many markets that attempt to consume and dictate arbitrarily by authority from the top how those who follow them should move about. But we're the only people who don't do that. We push agency down
Markets,
into every node so that
by
people
markets
can
you
make
don't
decisions.
mean by markets you don't mean commercial markets only, but you mean markets of attention,
Yeah,
markets
great.
of organization, political markets. Exactly. Yes.
Great
Okay.
distinction. Correct. Yeah, well, the existence of interchange on a landscape, right, of interactivity is a marketplace, right? Like the bazaar is a marketplace. So right now, like we have the global ethics of the bazaar. Everyone undercuts each other and tries to haggle on price instead of just producing value and competing on value right through time for the customers here. And it's worse because we treat the whole world as the customer base. So it's a big fuck you to everyone we're giving everything to, right? We're producing everything for. And we're going, well, you're not even good enough for value. And Martin would tell you, if you gave people the choice, they will choose the cheapest option in everything. That's character, personality, right, et cetera, and so on. We're trying to put the markets are truly free when they are limited by the law, because that's the only option set that produces a future choice vector that grows in opportunity and value and capital and so on. Everything else does not.
All right. So take us to your lawsuits and how that came about. What do you feel is at stake there? How do you think about it? And why does this matter to, let's say, the average American and perhaps even other observers?
Okay, that's it. Americans are entrepreneurial in everything, right? You more German, and some of our other guys are in Europe or elsewhere in the world. I have confidence that the self-determination, the agency being pushed into the citizenry, is what gives us the adaptive velocity we have as Americans. We have for decades, if not centuries, like 1 or 2 centuries, been divorced from having to operate as a true civilizational unit, which I would argue can only be as small as the family, not an individual, but as individual men, like martial discipline in everything is required to be part of this civilization. And at the scale we operate at, that means being fluent in jurisprudence, that your job as an American citizen. Not being fluent in jurisprudence means you don't have the tact to be a citizen here, and you're dependent on those who do have that tact.
You operate as a political consumer rather than as a political producer, if you are.
Correct. And they're tempered by everyone's foundational market, the vast majority of people in America's foundational market is the economic one, right? How much money do I make in a salary? What can I afford to buy as virtue signals in trade with that money? And can I keep that coming through time or grow it through time? And all those systems are rotted at the bottom. So that saving money the way we save it is simply robbing from the future people who stand to inherit the territory that you inhabit presently. That's all that's going on. So there isn't an excuse to maintain your bindedness, your boundedness to a system like that. It is betraying you and everything in front of you for whatever you want in the present. And that's at every scale that it operates. It's due to the communications advances and the commercial advances, the connection of everyone, that we have to raise the floor for participation in the deciding layer of society across societies. Like, that's just an obvious emergent problem we have to deal with. And the way we measure that is by citizens being required to know the law, jurisprudence, as the foundational social science for everyone who's an adult. And then from there, you can scale up. I am demonstrating the devastation that you can inflict on a corrupt system if you know how to stand under the law. if you understand jurisprudence, if you know that juries decide here, if you know that everything that happens in the court is a challengeable thing, that everything that happens in the court is a public thing, and that all the records that are in the court are public records, and claims made on record that are not rebutted rule the perceptual reality that exists. That's how we maintain order and settlement here is through court records, because it's how we manage disputes between people who differ in their endeavoring. And we are the only land that affords the people to choose what those endeavors are. If that's not the global aim, what the people of the world want, then it's irrelevant what they want. They need to be ruled like children, like the elites are doing currently. They're just lying to them. People choose to be ruled all the time. If anyone takes a cursory, straightforward look at history and does it any justice, you would afford people to choose slavery, not be tricked into it. And they would choose it, for the most part, because it's easier. You can forego responsibility and accountability. You can become a dependent. You can understand the edges and limitations of your actions, and you can pay for actions beyond those with graciousness. And that is a dignified life for most people. That is better than what we're offering people. And mind you, I just offered people slavery back. It's better than what you have now. You have people predating on you, using systems that you don't understand, at scales that you can't comprehend, and telling you that you're good for pursuing what you want to at any given second. And you believe that can be true. That's a fucking nightmare. That's a nightmare for everybody. We can't live that way. I can't live that way. I can't die and leave my kids a world in which people live that way. And there should be millions of people like me. So maybe I'm just first, but I'm opening doors for people. I don't want to be first and alone. I don't want to be first and alone.
Yep. And you're doing something in the real world with a real legal case that, in a way, that is afforded to you by your understanding of the foundations of our civilization, as well as how the world at large operates, right? And I think I want to emphasize that, because this is something that you can't really do if you merely adopt passively the pronouncements of your culture or your society or your educational system, unless you probe it to the depths of its existence and you attempt to remove from it all lies, bias, error, deceit, and so on. Well, you're simply subject to its inbuilt assumptions and directives and imperatives. And so this is what Brandon has done, and what we at the Natural Law Institute have done, which is to falsify and attempt to remove from the manner of speaking about any domain all that would lead one astray from having a real-world actionable understanding. And I want to emphasize the actionable part of that. A lot of what people pass off as philosophy or social science or even political agitation is anything but real. It is rather an attempt to acquire a desired end using the means at your disposal at the time that you attempt to acquire it. And that, of course, is prone to, problems, especially if it becomes the template upon which later generations or individual people as well attempt to construct a workable worldview that is supposed to orient them as to what they can do. And of course, yes, it does help you to understand what code runs in other people's minds, but that's about as much as it helps you. It doesn't actually say much about how the world works fundamentally. So given that background, that is what makes it possible for you to go into the court and to run this case less like a defensive, reactive defendant and more like a political or civilizational reformer, I would even say, that is using the process as a weapon against itself to show where the procedural rules and the negligence of the agents that are supposed to enact those rules opens them up to liability, and to drive the knife into those points of liability and open it up further and further, such that larger and larger swaths of the infrastructure or the institutional landscape that they derive their legitimacy from get brought into question. And as a consequence, hopefully give other individuals the intellectual and practical means to do the same thing. Because this is really what we need to do. We need to offer the market of current political consumers means to become political producers, and the existing pool of political producers the means to produce in a reciprocal and lawful manner, which if they do it now, they only really do by accident. So I know I've said a lot, but I consider what you're doing very much exemplary of the modern minute mindset or way of being in the world, because what to me modern Minuteman as an idea means is to understand what lawful action is, how the world works fundamentally, and to at all times in your life and work detect impositions of costs upon the interests that you and those around you have, and to always counter it, perhaps not in the moment when it is too costly to do so for yourself, but to not let that go and organize such that the infraction will be addressed and remediated. And it is this distribution of the capacity to counter corruption and parasitism and the position of costs and aggression in the population at large to as large a pool of people as we can muster that makes it possible for these minor, small things to not grow out of control and essentially corrupt and destroy the institutions that so many of us have for too long relied upon to do this task for us. And of course, we suffer as a consequence.
This is on the social medias, right? The affordance for those who are expert in grievance exists in the court in spades, right? The only thing that you need to add to the mix is transparency. I mean, you got to come to the court as you and make a complaint. You can't do it anonymously, which is a great jump for the great complainers of the time. Now, if you are claiming a grievance or complaining that you have an issue with this place that cannot be settled in court, because that is where you bring issues to be settled if you can't settle them yourself. If it's not something to settle by the law, then it's not something to settle in court, and courts shouldn't have to produce settlement against your dysfunction. Meaning, if you have a grievance that you can't bring to the courts and you are just airing it, it is because you are making shitty preferential choices in your life. Not because you have an actual grievance. Grievances can be brought to people to be adjudicated as actual disputes among people who require settlement between them. If that's not what you're endeavoring at, everything you do on the political landscape, in the courts, in e-commerce, in actual commerce, is just warfare. It's a proxy for warfare, an exchange between agents who wish to have asymmetric advantage over one another and wield that advantage brutally as soon as they've obtained it. But pretend that they'll get along until they do. You don't want to live around people like that. I'm warning people that the systems that guide your exchange make the agents here suspect from the get-go. And that's of every type and kind. And it only gets worse as the agents are more cognitively unmoored as people, untethered from the, feedback that comes from the actual real world. So we are hurling towards, at a pace I am uncomfortable with, a chaos on the horizon that we can essentially sidestep by actually bringing our problems to a place that wishes to settle them between the people who have them. And if you don't have that, you should frame what you're doing as a war. From both sides, at least that's honest. People presently require the update in honesty, authenticity, and transparency. And I don't just mean because of the social technology. I mean, because we were just betrayed for 5 years in a row by every institution that exists across all information streams that we care to know what exists at the bottom of, so that we can make decisions for our people to persist through time. And we're going to try to forget that. Is that what they're planning on doing? Because me and my people don't plan on forgetting that at all. I'm watching people set up to pull the same tricks again. I doubt it. I doubt it. To bring some scale, I'm one person. I'm one person. The city of Boston has spent millions of dollars on me over the last couple months. Millions. In attention, time, obfuscation, etc. No enemy can bear that cost. Zero of them. They cannot do it. If you produced a dozen people creating the disruption that I'm creating in each state, this whole place would come down in 6 hours.
Yeah, we need to leverage the asymmetry of economic exchange in our favor. Before, I would love to continue this for a long time, but we have limited time available. So why don't you finish off with giving just a minute each to what the case is that you are pursuing and how people can help you out. And on the other side, what you intend to teach our participants in the upcoming crew campaign.
I'll put it all together in a story that's tied to my case, okay? I have a public records request out for information on municipal bonds. The first response that I got from the city was, that's not a public records request. That's what it said. Not a okay, well, I mean, what kind of request is it if what I'm sending into you isn't a request for information? What is it? So after a few back and forths, which caused them time and suffering and so on, and my emails are lengthy, they produced the records request that I asked for, which says that there are 2.66 million documents that could be captured within this request, that it would take them 44,333 hours to complete that records request, and the amount at $25 an hour is something like $1.1 million and change, but they would perform the request as they stated for $15,000. Now, all of that is a tactic to make me go away in producing this request, right? They think they're being clever. But what they did was offer me the city of Boston's labor in producing 2.5 million records for the rate of 33 cents, give or take, an hour. So if I had a Lawfare arm that paid them $15,000, they would have to take me to court to not spend 44,333 hours producing records for me, which is about 5 years of work. That's one email exchange inside of one case for one impropriety. I mean, I am looking to see how badly they've been obscuring the liabilities for bonds in Boston, which is probably to the tunes of billions of dollars. The people who are corrupt cannot afford their corruption being shown. And the amount of energy they will take to obscure that information is outrageous. And if you can get them to take the time to do it, they prove their guilt by obstruction. You'll never have to prove the claims. The fact that they're trying to keep you from getting the information to prove the claims is enough. It's more than enough, and that's on top of what it is for economic warfare. I can teach anybody to do that. It's a very easy thing. Standing is an easy thing to do. To open a case costs a few $100s, but it's their duty to take it in. It's the American court's duty to answer your grievances, even if all you did was pile them with paperwork. So what they had to do was go through the paperwork too slowly and grant dismissals at a rate. You just tied up an arm of the enemy institutions that crushes your people daily.
Right.
We have serious asymmetric leverage here because the jury decides here. We decide what is law. American people decide what is law. When I sit on the jury, I decide whether or not the law applies in your case, even if you broke it. If you murdered someone for good reason, I have the authority to go, yeah, you did the right thing. We should throw a party. We decide that here. We are the only place in which we can decide that, and that needs to spread everywhere because people need to be that capable with what we have for technology, lest they don't want the technology, because that's what comes next, right? Gatekeeping the technology from peoples who don't have the ability to wield it properly.
Right. So, American men, hear this message. There is a path to you reclaiming your sovereignty in a very pragmatic way. If you wish to pursue that seriously, which I would hearken you do, then please get in touch with Brandon and us at the Natural Law Institute. We will help you do so and sign up for the upcoming 5-week crew campaign where we'll help you set up your operational infrastructure so that you can participate in this cooperative joint venture of reforming our civilization and actually rediscovering the foundations on which it stands and owning them. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks for coming, Brandon, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Moritz. It was fun.
Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization isn't an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict, though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.